So the three things that I wanted to touch on today in terms of the presentation, very briefly, is who is CLEANFarms? CLEANFarms is a new organization that we just formed in 2010 in Canada. What's the current landscape in Canada in terms of stewardship programs, both in the agriculture sector and the greater packaging industry within the national context there? And then lastly, just wrap up with a little bit of where we see the world going in terms of product stewardship and in particular the agriculture realm, which I really see as it's just starting in Canada as an expanding recycling market. And I think some of the other speakers today will touch on some of the more mature type of activities that are going on in other parts of the world. But from our standpoint, that's where we start to see the great opportunity for growth in the CLEANFarms realm. So very, very briefly, who is CLEANFarms? CLEANFarms is an industry stewardship organization. It's a federal, national, not-for-profit group. It has a private sector board which consists of the manufacturers of crop protection products in Canada. And overall, we're a voluntary stewardship program, except in one province, Manitoba, where product stewardship is a government-regulated activity. We see that moving to the future in terms of other provinces going down the path of regulation, but currently, right now, it's voluntary. One of the key pieces in terms of our overall mission, and I just wanted to flag this with the group, traditionally, our product stewardship has been crop protection products, i.e. 10-liter or 10-liter close to crop protection containers. And we just moved recently to agricultural waste. And I think that's a big move from a board level standpoint, from an operational standpoint, is seeing the bigger picture of ag waste and in the concept of delivering stewardship programs. And no longer are we just seeing it being a crop protection sector issue here. Very briefly, these are our members, predominantly the large 6 multinationals as well as several distributors in the Canadian marketplace. One of the key pieces here from a statistics standpoint is this represents over 90% of the Canadian crop protection marketplace, so it's very powerful when you have all the members in that particular sector participating voluntarily in product stewardship. In the Canadian context, very briefly here, and I think it's quite similar to the Australian agriculture. These are just some aggregate statistics. The key piece here is, there's a lot of farmland across the country, and it's very diverse. And from a national standpoint, going from the far left, British Columbia is characterized by predominantly horticulture production, a lot of tree crop type activities. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Moving to the right is predominantly grain and oilseed, large farms. Keep going into Ontario and Quebec. It's a very mixed farming activities there, a lot of corn, soybeans, as well as high value crops. And then moving to the Atlantic side, which is predominantly horticulture, as well as large potato production. So one of the key pieces in the message that I want to get across today is the agriculture is very dynamic across the country, and to deliver stewardship programs to the various sectors here, you have to make it very dynamic and very fluid in terms of how you meet the growers' needs. Very briefly, where we came from CropLife Canada is we have a full life cycle stewardship, all the way from research and development and introducing new crop protection and plant biotech products into the marketplace, all the way to end-use disposal. In 2010, we split those two programs off into a newly formed organization called CLEANFarms, which would be very similar to ag stewardship in Australia. It's governed by a separate board, as well as the two main national programs we have would be the empty container collection program, as well as the obsolete pesticide collection program. And we do run one regional program, which is paper bag collection. In some areas of the country, there's multi-wall paper bags, predominantly in the potato sector, so we pick up those bags and have them incinerated. Very briefly, in terms of our programs, I just want to give everybody a very top-level context in terms of what these programs look like. From an empty container collection, we have approximately 1,000 collection points across the country. That's split up. About 80% of them are at ag retails or point of sale. So whereas the grower would purchase the product from the ag retail site, they bring back their containers, and we'll pick up the containers at agreed upon times throughout the growing season, which in Canada is predominantly from May through October. On average, in any given year, we pick up about between 4 and 5 million containers. Since the late 80s, we've picked up well over 80 million containers. So those are just some rough statistics. In terms of a national average, we pick up about 63 to 65% in any given year of the containers shipped into the Canadian marketplace. And one thing I would say is that differs between the growing regions. In some of the heavy horticulture areas, we have much greater return rates, whereas in the prairie provinces and the grain and oilseed sector, it tends to be somewhat less. And I think that has to do with the heavy urban population and the requirements that growers are starting to have for enhanced stewardship. They tend to pick it up a little bit faster. For the most part, most of the product that we're taking in right now, we chip it, we wash it, and the vast majority is going into field drainage tile right now. So we go through the process of finding the end use markets with the recycled product, and right now that's where it's going.
Sorry.
Oh.
Field drainage tile?
In terms of the obsolete collection, very briefly here, we've been running these programs since the late 1990s. The vast majority of the product that we get in goes for high temperature incineration. For the last 5 years, all of it has gone through high temperature incineration. And the model that we run there is it's a program we deliver every 4 years in each province. So we would have a collection in year 1, no collection in year 2 and 3, and then a collection again in year 4. And we run that across the country nationally. On average, we pick up about 130 to 150 ton of product on an annual basis. And just a couple of visuals here. This would be a typical grower coming into one of the collection locations that we set up, predominantly at ag retails or municipalities, depending on the particular province. We do get in a significant amount of very, very old product. Every grower that participates in the program, we do an exit survey with, and for the most part, we find that over 50% of the product that comes into our obsolete collection programs is over 25 years old. As you can see from some of these visuals here, this is very, very old product that comes in. And in some instances, not in very good condition. So with that, that's a little bit of a context in terms of where we are from a stewardship standpoint in the Canadian marketplace. The latter part of the discussion that I want to have today is what's going on in terms of the overall packaging stewardship regulations in Canada. And this is a bit of an eye chart for those of you at the back, but the key piece that I wanted to discuss here is the type of products that are coming into regulation. In Canada, for the most part, we have the old standbys, the tires, the beverage containers. Those are very long-standing, successful stewardship programs. But what we're starting to see now is various provincial governments getting into enhanced stewardship for products that hadn't traditionally been part of stewardship activities in terms of managing those products. And what we can see here is we're starting to get into cell phones, more in the oil-type containers. Needles, sharps, pharmaceuticals, and the key piece that I wanted to show is on the top right side, the sixth one in is commercial pesticide containers, and that's one of the challenges we had working with the local governments has been we run a national program, but they view everything at the provincial level, so that's one of the challenges that we do have there. Very briefly here, and I won't spend a lot of time on this type of stuff. One of the other challenges that we see. And in some provinces, we go from top to bottom, we have all packaging becoming legislated. So the governments are starting to see, and this is predominantly at the provincial level, in the departments of environment, they're starting to see political momentum to have stewardship programs in place for all packaging in some instances. In other provinces, they only have targeted packaging, which they'll focus in on. And the key message here is it's all over the board in Canada. In some provinces, they have pesticide containers, other provinces, they don't. And I think that's one of the challenges we have as an industry right now is the unpredictability within the stewardship activities at the provincial level. What we'd really like to see is this be mandated at the national level. I really don't see that happening. So what we end up having to do is have discussions with each provincial government in terms of what the stewardship regulations will be from a pesticide standpoint. Very briefly, to give you context of the process that we go through in the Canadian marketplace, and this is generic enough that for the most part this is what happens in every province. The government will indicate that they would like to have a product stewardship scheme put together for a particular product. In our case, pesticide containers as well as other ag waste that are starting to come in there. That would constitute animal health type pharmaceutical products, fertilizer containers, et cetera, They'll pass the regulation. Then they target the stewards. Who are the manufacturers of these products? They'll come after them in terms of let's put together a stewardship program, folks. They'll approve the plan at the ministry level. So this is a government mandated stewardship plan. This isn't an industry-led stewardship plan. And then the plan's implemented. So that's the key piece there. In a lot of these cases, this is government driven. A lot of these instances, the industry has chosen to do nothing or chosen to be unengaged in the process. And I think that's really key. One of the key successes that we've had from a pesticide industry standpoint is we've been running these programs for 20 odd years, and we can go to the government and say, this is what works for our members, and for the most part that is a very positive discussion. You're not having your future dictated for you, you're dictating it. In terms of what the requirements are, they're going to ask for what are the products, a key product targeted, which would be, from a pesticide standpoint, it would be a commercial pesticide or a domestic pesticide for a fertilizer, et cetera. What are your targets? Our targets right now for obsolete collection are that we have a collection program within 50 kilometers of the vast majority of Canadian farmers. So in some provinces that means we have 15 collection points. In smaller provinces, other ones we have in the area of 45 or 50, which becomes very unwielding in terms of delivering type programs, but that's important that we dictate what the accessibility is. What are our recovery rates? You can see from our empty container collection, it's in the mid-60s. How do we promote this program? How do we contact growers? How do we ensure that they know about their stewardship obligations? And then finally, who pays for it? That's really key. And then lastly is the reporting structure. Let me skip through this. I think the key piece here is we try to run very efficient programs on behalf of our members. And I think that's really key. When industry can dictate how our money is spent, you can basically dictate your future as opposed to having it told to you. I can give you a couple examples here of what's happened in the Ontario marketplace with a couple products, and the two will be domestic pesticides and fertilizers. And Stewardship Ontario is an overarching stewardship organization mandated by the provincial Department of Environment. And they have a phased-in approach, basically phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And most of the pesticides came in phase 2 or 3, which they implemented simultaneously. But we had a couple challenges with this. Is from a political standpoint, they restricted the use of all domestic pesticides in the Ontario marketplace. Therefore, in what I characterize by domestic pesticides, I would say homeowner-type pesticides to spray in your lawns, et cetera. One of the challenges they had there is, for the most part, the industry didn't engage the Ministry of Environment at the time when they were developing these type of programs. And what we saw happen was they came up with stewardship levy fees that were very difficult for the industry to take into account. You can see here $1.73 per kilo of products. So if you had a 500 milliliter squeeze bottle of Roundup, for lack of a better example, you're paying in upwards of 30 to 40% of stewardship fees to manage those type of products. And that was very difficult from a consumer standpoint as well as a manufacturer standpoint. And the key piece here is these costs are being borne by industry if you don't have that discussion with the regulators prior to a program being implemented.